So this guy was the perfect criminal. So how did Pokemon literally ruin his career? Now the guy's name is Anthony, and Anthony's about 19 when this story starts, and he's living in Monroe, Washington. And Anthony is the town golden boy, captain of the football team and the basketball team. He's broken school records. He's the homecoming hero, dating the popular cheerleader. Then he gets himself a partial scholarship to play football at the University of Idaho. So he starts playing for them. My point is, Anthony is a guy who wins. But then one day during his sophomore year, he suddenly can't win anymore. Because he's at practice running a punt return, and boom, he tears his ACL. And because of that, he's put on Vicodin for the pain. And the Vicodin works really well. In fact, it works so well that he wants to take them all the time. And eventually he gets addicted. And he gets so addicted that when his prescription runs out, to get another prescription, he intentionally injures his own foot. And this addiction lasts for years. Sometimes he takes up to 30 pills a day. And eventually he also starts taking Valium and doing cocaine, and he starts drinking heavily. The guy's a mess. Now, obviously, due to his injury, his football career never worked out. So he ends up getting his real estate license, and he starts making pretty good money flipping houses. But, unfortunately, he spends all of that on his pill addiction. But then it's 2008, and he's around 28 years old now, and the housing market crashes. And suddenly, Anthony is broke. No income, and his bank account goes all the way down to $20, and he has to start doing landscaping work for his parents' company just to get by. But see, Anthony, he has a wife and kids, and landscaping isn't paying enough money to support his family and his drug habit. But then, one day, he's out on one of his landscaping jobs outside the federal courthouse, and there he sees this armored truck making a delivery. And that is when he gets an idea. If he can rob an armored truck, then he'll have more than enough money to pay his bills and fund his drug habit. So Anthony starts mapping out this heist he wants to pull off. And he becomes obsessed with planning this thing out. He stakes out and watches armored trucks making deliveries to this specific Bank of America in Monroe. He also practices a lot. Like he starts doing dry runs at the bank, stashing a wig and a mask at a dumpster nearby so that he can grab his disguise. And he rehearses the whole thing, and he ditches the gear again without anyone noticing. In fact, he practices so much that one time a local homeless man near the bank sees him grab the wig and mask. Anyway, Anthony plans and he practices for an entire year before he feels like he's ready. Then, finally, a few days before the heist, he makes his last move. He places a fake ad on Craigslist. The ad is for workers for a city cleanup job paying $28.50 an hour. And Anthony tells everyone who responds to the ad to show up at the bank on the day of the cleaning job wearing a very specific outfit, a yellow safety vest, a blue shirt, and a painter's mask. Then the day of the heist arrives, and 12 or so guys from the Craigslist ad show up to the parking lot of the bank wearing exactly what he told them. And Anthony is dressed like them as well. Plus, he's wearing a wig and a fake mustache. So these poor day laborers are now unknowingly decoys. And as Anthony and all these guys are milling about in the parking lot, an armored truck pulls up outside the bank, and a guard steps out with the bags of money because he's making a scheduled delivery. But before the guard can deliver anything, boom, Anthony pulls out a can of bear mace and he sprays him in the face. Then he grabs 2 bags of cash containing about $400,000 and he runs away. And as he's running away, he rips off his disguise and he tosses it, so now he's in a totally different outfit. And he runs to this nearby creek because he knows police will be all over the streets. So he gets to this creek and he jumps into an inner tube that he had set up there, and he grabs onto this cable that he had rigged up there, and he uses it to pull himself to freedom. And pretty quickly, police show up to the bank parking lot looking for the robber. And the lot is full of identically dressed guys who all match the suspect's description. So it's impossible to tell who the real criminal is or if he's still even there. Meanwhile, Anthony takes a trip to Vegas. and he spends about $30,000 of the stolen money on suites at the Palms and on bottle service. He cheats on his wife while he's there, because of course he does. And so it looks like Anthony has committed the perfect heist and gotten away, and he's back to being a guy who wins. Until that local homeless man near the bank who saw Anthony grab the wig and mask, he thought that was real suspicious. So he wrote down the license plate of the car Anthony was driving, and he reported it to the police. Now, eventually, police are able to trace the car back to Anthony's wife, which leads right to Anthony. And so, bam, he gets arrested. Here's his mugshot. And he gets sentenced to 6 years in prison. However, that's not the end of his story. Because while he's in prison, he obviously gets sober and he starts to turn his life around. And he starts writing children's books for his daughters back home. In fact, he writes 20 children's books. Anyway, he spends about 4.5 years in prison, and in 2013, he gets out, and then he self-publishes his children's books, and he actually becomes a 5-time best-selling children's book author. And because of that, he becomes a motivational speaker, and he starts traveling around the country, speaking at middle schools and high schools and universities, talking about things like drug addiction and accountability, and what effect making bad decisions can have on your life. And he's featured on an episode of 2020. He does a TEDx talk. So it looks like he's completely turned his life around and he's back to being a guy who wins, just, in a more positive way. Until again. So it's now 2022. And I don't know if Anthony is broke again or if he's addicted to drugs again. But around this time, he and a buddy of his, they notice there's a boom in sports trading cards. So they get into the trading card business, and they come up with this whole scheme where they buy real but mediocre graded cards in the case, and they'll crack them open and they'll reseal them in a counterfeit case with fake but perfect grades. They'll buy a Michael Jordan rookie card worth about $7,000, and they'll relabel the grade and sell it at a card show or online for $170,000, which is fraud. And of course, later, the buyer will try to resell it and they'll learn that the grading is fake. And these two turds pull this scam so much that they end up selling more than $2 million worth of fraudulent cards. And so pretty quickly, some of these buyers who bought from them online, they get pissed off and they report them to the FBI. So then the feds get involved and they start investigating. And one of them goes undercover and contacts Anthony and pretends to be interested in buying a rare Pokemon Venusaur card for about $10,500 that they have listed. And Anthony and his partner sell him the Pokemon card, and eventually, bam, the feds arrest them. And so ultimately, his partner takes a plea deal and he hasn't actually been sentenced yet, while Anthony goes to trial and he's found guilty and he's still currently waiting on his sentence.